we would say we'd rather force some people to work than allow other people to starve.
Okay, but then they work. Yes, they work like shit. You give them money, and then the people that actually work, they see that they're not working. Oh, they're still getting money. They're still getting all of this, even though they're doing shit job or like doing nothing at all. And it's just
why do you think that that's how it would be? Why would it necessarily be like that's not what any of us work? Like that's not what any of us want.
But you give them
there were mistakes. There were mistakes made during the Soviet period. There were numerous mistakes made during the Soviet period.
They forced you to work. Continue.
There were numerous mistakes made.
Worked in factory.
I can't hear you, Sid, because I can't hear you because when you talk.
You talk Soviet.
Hold on. There were mistakes made as a factor of not being developed into modern technology. Like there are things that modern technology has taught us about how we can manage certain things in a more efficient way. Computerized systems are going to enable us to manage so many things in a more efficient way. Like if the Soviets in the 1950s, for example, had the technology of today to manage the economy, it would have been far, far, far more efficient, far, far more on solid
manage the economy?
Right? To manage the economy as like how they would manage state-run resources. Like computers and modern technology is enabling much, much more efficient management of the economy. And that's why you see China today thriving, why they've created so much prosperity over the last 40 years, because they've been able to seamlessly blend some market reforms with modern technology to create efficiency and growth.
But now, basically, in America, you have like the same situation, but different outcome. You have to work, but you would do what you would do if you didn't work. You would put them in some kind of punishment or jail like that. But now the people still have to work. It's mandatory to work, but the outcome that if you don't work, it's not jail. It's just like you don't have property, you don't have this and this and this.
Why do you think people, let me just ask you this, why do you think people should be able to not, like us, and I'm saying this includes health problems, disability, we don't consider those here. Why should someone be able to not work while benefiting from society?
How benefiting? They're not benefiting though.
But you do, but you do. Well, listen.
How do they benefit?
Okay, how do they benefit? So let's say you live in a city, right? Mm-hmm. You live in a city, you choose not to work, right? You go to the grocery store and you buy some food. How did the food get there? It was
from what? When you don't work, you don't have money.
Okay, right. So you're saying in either world you have to work because
yes, exactly. But now your consequences are far more brutal than the capitalist consequence. Yes, because you put them in jail. And you have to fund it anyway.
Wait.
Hold on really quick. One of Elon Musk's kids could have one.
No.
Wait, I can't hear both of
never have to work their whole life.
Please, Gabe, please. But Joy, why do you think it's worse to be homeless and starving? Or why do you think it's better to be homeless and starving than to be in jail?
What do you mean? But no, because you say they live free from how do you say it? They leech on from, like, what do you mean? Like
they are benefiting from other people.
They're benefiting, right? How are they benefiting when you give them a jail cell, when you give them a home, and you like a home in quotations, and you feed them in the jail? You have to provide all of this. You just provide it to them, and when when they don't go to jail, you don't provide that at all. You just still have to fund it. Huh?
Wait, so you're saying that
people also can work.
Prison labor is a very big thing, especially in the United States. When we're talking about the incarceration rate, we could look at the US compared to the Soviet Union.
The amount of people that would go to jail because they're not working, you would open a lot, like so much more jails, and you will have to fund all of it, and will be much more.
No, you wouldn't.
But that's the hold on.
We would. It's cheaper to solve homelessness than put them in jail because They cost over $100,000 a year if you put them in jail, so it's cheaper to solve homelessness.
And
Why
actually,
would you choose to not
If you're
work?
a socialist.
and actually, what you're doing is you're actually going to you're going to end up reducing the overall incarceration rates, and this is due to the fact, right, that people are going to be more incentivized to engage in their labor.
She's really quick. She's Polish.
Procent ludzi uwięzionych, procent ludzi w więzieniach, incarceration.
Thank you, City. Sorry.
Okay. You can continue. I'm sorry.
In China, right? We can look at China's prison system, and we actually see that there is a huge degree of people in China who actually have never even been introduced to this idea of incarceration or into this idea of a prison system, because people don't have really they don't really do anything to go against any laws. They don't do anything to really put themselves in a situation where now they have to be imprisoned. It's because they are engaging in their labor, and because you now have an incentive to actually work. You are being under a socialist system. The system is reproducing itself through a reproduction of labor.
Means you make people want, right? Incentive to zachęta.
Okay.
Could we also say you're not just engaging in your labor, but you're
it's
really
not
engaging in your
incentive.
society,
It's not
right?
incentive.
Yes.
You can't say it's an
A little bit more.
incentive if it's
To the degree that they're
mandatory, because
Pushing away
incentive.
capitalism.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there are two factors. One is not incentive that you go to prison, but what is incentive? For example, if you work in factory and one is working harder and make 200 pieces of product, and other is making 150, the other, the one that makes 200 earns more, earns like like 4/4, right? Okay, I make other example. One make 150, other make 100, right? The other makes 50% more, and that was happening in People's Survival Fund. You cannot introduce this everywhere, but anyway, we are not in favor of everyone earns the same, but everyone earns according to her work, right?
Don't we want a merit? Do you merit?
Yeah.
Like,
So what about people that can't work?
they should be supported by the state.
No, I know, but I know your opinion. I'm wondering. I'm saying, according to her logic, if they can't, right? If we're doing it all according to how hard you can work, because there's degrees too. There's not just people that can't work at all, but there's
no, I'm just saying about homeless right now, right? We're talking
I'm just saying there's people that work like at a quarter the rate of other people, right? Perhaps. I'm hypothesizing, and I don't think they deserve a quarter of the food as other people, right?
Also, by the way,
I can tell from example of my grandmother.
If you work more shitty, you get less. I don't.
Okay, what if you're born with one arm, right? Like you can't work as hard as someone else at the foundry, or like these are.
Yes, but you're not.
scenarios.
But the critique for you is different. It's not the same.
What do you mean? Though you're saying the criteria is different. Okay,
yes.
But there's not a custom criteria for every person's individual scenario.
Well, no. Well, for disabled, what's happening now with
there are different levels of disability, though.
Yes. Then are they working normal jobs? And like, what's the?
That's the question.
Well,
right now in America, disabled people, are they working normal jobs? Or are they supported by the government?
They're supported by
both.
Both.
There's different tiers.
But at the same time, that's not universal among all capitalist countries. There are capitalist countries that have basically no protections for people with disabilities, right?
And there's other capitalist countries like the Nordic models, for example, which actually take care full-heartedly of these people.
Disabled people are covered. They're not just left alone. Yeah, go die, and I don't care about you. You just
how do you think it worked before we had the government stepping in? That's exactly how it did work. They'd be taken care of by their families, or they died.
Well, now the government
They don't do enough. They don't do anywhere close to enough.
Right.
I don't. Okay, what are you proposing then? For the disabled people, what are you proposing? They just what? What do you mean?
We weren't proposing anything. We were just talking about.
Yeah, I'm not really.
We were talking about under socialism. Now you were talking, and you were saying, what would you do about disabled people? do they just get less?
I just think the metric shouldn't necessarily be tied to like your productive outcome per se.
You know, there's more market than just that.
Yeah.
It wouldn't just be that. There would be multiple factors to determine wages.
And like, if you study China,
Well,
go ahead though. I don't want to change the topic.
But now there is no problem with disabled people.
Disability. There are different levels of disability. Like high level of disability doesn't allow you to work, then you should be covered by state. You should get finances from state.
They are.
Because we live in Europe, because we live in Europe, because there was Soviet Union next to Western Europe had to make those security policies.
I mean,
but in Africa, in Asia, in South America, it's not necessarily like that. In many countries, such security.
So what do they do with it? Because I don't know.
You have to kind of like make a determination why it is that like in Russia they had a literal class of landlords that were trying to drag their feet because they opposed the direction of the economy, right? The kulaks. So you have to decide, like, is this a class of people that's intentionally being reactionary, or are they just like working a little slower than other people, right? Like, it's not a big deal if it's just like little differences between people, and I don't think you have to encourage competition, right?
No, you don't.
Class antagonism between people, right? But at the same time, like if you have a class of people like kulaks that are intentionally not doing output, or like what were they doing? They were burning their crop, refusing to collectivize the farms, any number of these things. And so they got, you get sent to fucking Siberia, and that's when we can guarantee you're contributing to society, It sucks, but...
CD, ale o co ci chodzi z tym, z tymi, że są levele nie tego. Jezu, wiesz o co mi chodzi. Ale...
Pełnosprawności, tak. Jest lekka, są różne stopnie.
No ale co to ma do rzeczy, jak i tak pokryci są ci niepełnosprawni, i tak są pokryci. No to o co wam chodzi?
Okay, so Joy is asking me, what did I mean that there are different levels of disability?
No, I did not ask that. Mówię teraz do ciebie, stary. Po prostu nie wiem, jaki wy teraz robicie punkt, że ludzie z tym, jak mają, jak się mówi, Jezu, już po polsku nawet zapomniałam.
Niepełnosprawni.
Niepełnosprawność w ogóle, ja nie rozumiem, jak są teraz dobrze, jakby oni nie są, nie każe im nikt przecież pracować, przecież nie wysyłają ich nigdzie, więc nie rozumiem, o co my się teraz kłócimy. Robisz jakiś punkt, że co?
Dobra. Okay, Gabe, so at some point you try to make counter-argument, it looked for Joy and for me also, like you try to make counter-argument about that disabled. So Joy didn't mean she's against supporting disabled, right? That's what you meant. You are not.
I don't get the argument. We are I don't get what we are arguing right now.
Joy, don't know what's the point of this conversation.
No. But disabled, I don't see
the connection.
Maybe. They say yes, we should support disabled people. I don't think we disagree on this.
Okay, so we were talking about how things would look under a socialist system, and we got to the topic of how you would define labor and how much people would get paid. And so someone said, okay, so what would happen with disabled people if you paid people based on how much they produced? It was just a question based on that. Well, we were just talking about what a socialist system would look like. That's all.
Well,
and we were answering your questions about that.
Like a socialist system would neither like delineate or what I mean is like draw lines between or make distinctions between like the exact amount of output this worker makes versus that worker, but it would distinguish between people that are outright opposed to the revolution or to the large scale actions of what the working class is trying to do. 1 second.
Yeah.
Right, and those who would go
the same wage to most people.
No.
Understanding wrong.
No,
I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry.
Yes. Okay. So wage, right? Wage labor exists under capitalism. This dynamic would actually change under socialism. What we would have, right, is we would have a understanding of the social the social necessary time that it takes to produce a commodity or a product, and you would be basing somebody's wage or their earnings, right, based on the social surplus value of that social necessary time. And so you're not paying everybody the same wage. Okay, you're not paying everybody the same wage. That doesn't exist. That's not even a viable response. It just wouldn't even work out right. But what socialism
And then
would
what
be
do you want to
prevailing,
change?
right? What socialism
Then what
would
do you
be
want to
showing?
change?
What?
The
What do you
thing
want
that
to
we want to
change then?
change is it's not the fact that there's like pay tiers based on like performance or whatever. It's the relationship that it's the exploitation that the boss is doing to the worker. That's what we want to change.
Right. So under capitalism, we have
So
a
you want
managerial
to take,
class.
you just want to you just want to take their like authority away, like
That's
like
part
they-
of it. Yes,
That's part of it.
I feel like as Marxists, we don't compliment. I mean, it sounds fucked up, but we don't compliment capitalism enough. Like, we want to actually harness the fact, like the social aspect of capitalism's labor, the way it socializes labor. It just doesn't socialize the output. So we want to take that output and instead of privatizing it, by socializing labor, I mean like capitalism brings people into these factories and kind of equalizes all their class positions where they're all just workers, more or less, is what Marxist theory kind of predicts over time. And it kind of flattens things to a certain degree. And that is
Right, but that's
solidarity.
Yes, but that's particularly tied to early stage capitalism because we are now existing in late stage capitalism.
I understand we are.
Yeah, right. So,
and there is like a development of a middle class even in like China, but there still is even larger than that, kind of like a proletarian class.
Yes, and with that, right, with that, it's because of the direct setup of the Chinese system of having resemblance of a dictatorship of the proletariat, right?
And they're controlling it with the party, right? And that's what I'm saying. So they're socializing that surplus value instead of just saying, let's totally privatize it and just let people make a number go up. Like Elon Musk's going to be a trillionaire, whereas Jack Ma has to shut the fuck up in China. And I'm not saying like they're not attacking the capitalist class of China, but they're on a leash to a degree. And that's a very significant.
Yes, no, I also believe
change.
like no person should have this amount of authority and money. This is not natural to have so much power for one person. I understand, but like.
But there's no way to stop it unless you force it to stop. That's the unfortunate thing. It doesn't feel comfortable. Like what we have to do to get the authority to stop that, it doesn't feel comfortable sometimes. You have to give that authority to the state, but it is the only way to stop that. It's just
so you want like protest for communism or something?
No,
like,
because giving
it starts by getting people allied against the ruling class, allied and aware of their class, aware of the class contradiction.
But you just yeah, you can't do that because you just said how they want to be, like they adore Donald Trump, like they want this
process.
His leader, they want the leader.
It's not going to happen overnight. It might even take 100 years. But the point is, there is a process of education that has to happen. America is not ready for that revolution yet, political or social or otherwise. It's in a position of growth socially. We have to educate the masses. We have to give them the tools to eventually come to the conclusion.
Well, you can, yes,
Hold on. We have to give them the tools to eventually come to this conclusion together that this is not a sustainable system, that they do have to work together and find their power.
I have the cheat code.
This is just, it's going to take time. And it starts with conversations like this where we just speak and even just give people awareness of the ideas. And that's something that
I have the cheat code.
If you think of Marxism or just socialist thought as like an infection, right? Where you tell 10 people about it. If just one of them starts to adopt it, you've created change, right? And it's a gradual process. Even if you look in the United States polls from 1990, do you consider socialism to be an acceptable ideology or something like that? 20, 30 years ago, it was like 10% of Americans who said yes. Now it's 50%. Who say they would consider voting for a socialist candidate or something like that. So Americans, even Americans, are warming up to the idea of socialism and the idea that there is this oligarchy that is really ultimately controlling our lives, controlling the direction of our country. People know that we don't have any.
But there can also be like yes, I voted for the socialists, but they also like the people that like run for I'm socialist, like they hide behind the name socialist, and they're not actually. They just like.
Well, that's why we don't believe in electoralism.
Why do you assume that?
Because it's kind of like in Poland, like yes, they were hiding behind the name, I don't know how to explain.
Got the Solidarność party, right?
Well, so for example, right? For example,
Solidarność was like against it, like it was against the communism.
Well, so I kind of understand where you're going at with this, but this is why we don't support electoralism. For example, the largest socialist by name socialist party existing in America is the DSA, the Democratic Socialist of America. They're the largest party across the board when it comes to
America don't have parties.
You're right. You're right. Essentially, you're right. But going with this idea, right, that people actually vote for socialism. We don't support this idea because this actually doesn't achieve anything socialistic in the long run.
Then what do you want to implement?
You cannot convince through policy changing for the ruling class to just voluntarily give up their power. It will never happen. It's never happened in history, and every time historically that it has tried to reform its way into socialism, it is usually through concessions that are granted by the ruling class, concessions which, by the way, can and are usually taken away
by fascism whenever
yes.
things go wrong.
Yes.
Okay. I have a cheat code for you guys how to get people to be socialist. You have to go with socialist economic policies, anti-immigration, and like neutral to LGBT, all these things, neutral to DEI.
So that's the thing, right? Is Marxist for the most part. We're not anti-immigration. We are anti-mass immigration. There's a difference, and
but they will notice that, and they won't vote for you.
Well, hold on, because it's a tool of the ruling class to have mass immigration to replace the working class of the country, because they want to give up jobs and they want to funnel in through social and welfare programs to feed through that. They want to supply these immigrants, which are actually taking from the working class, which is going to continue the ruling class to raise taxes on the working class, because who has to supply that? Who has to actually be the one to support the welfare systems? It's us, through our own very labor, through our own tax dollars.
Like the small group of laborers that are net profit generators, and I think these people are frustrated, and they want the economic socialist party that's not just like actually draining them of their money in the end of the day, which every socialist party does right now.
You know,
I think people are frustrated with it.
I don't necessarily agree with, like, I think that the right move, if people are being brought over from overseas, is to try to like seek solidarity instead of like oppose it, even though objectively I know what the purpose of it is. Like, I know where the capitalist class is.
Who cares about solidarity if you're losing all your money and you're like,
the point is, it's not about caring. It's about, you have to push towards like international solidarity, because the opposite is like, that's what American unions did in the past, was like this whites only type shit, and it's really
international solidarity doesn't.
And actually,
all you're doing is proving like the settler nature of American communism by doing that. Though, is if you're saying like, oh, we need to have like, and then all you're doing is like what I was going to say is like, that's why people end up with Trump, because he's the only one out of the two parties that was saying, oh, I'm going to look out for the American worker. And that was all bullshit. Like, he's going to be a supporter of H-1B, but the Democrats were just like, no, everything's great. Like, haha. You know, plur, let's go to a rave. Like, they just want like party.
A lot of the problems with immigration are because we are caused by stuff like imperialism and like climate change, like displacing people. So like instead of like placing all
that's
these,
a problem for their countries, not for the host country.
But that's the thing. Who is causing the
The host
imperialism?
country is
But
causing
that's not the
problem.
problem of the country. That's the problem of them, those countries.
No, but it is our problem because
take
we're the
on
one
everyone's
we're the
burden.
one that is worsening the conditions through material and
it's
resource
bad for them.
extraction.
Not bad for you. It's bad for them.
I don't think you
have to be
realize.
realistic and selfish as a state.
Stabilized conditions. You have to work with them if you want to stabilize things, right?
Well, you have to
So-
destabilize your enemies and stabilize yourself.
So Hyperga, right? The reason that we go towards trying to reach solidarity with people who are coming over is because we have to recognize as Marxist and materialist that the very reason that they are coming over here is due to the imperialism that is occurring in their own country. By the way, that imperialism is sourced from the core of the imperial core, which is America, undoubtedly, right? And it is through America going in with the CIA, with its extensions and its military-industrial complex like BlackRock and so on, that certain things occur in these countries that worsen those conditions.
Guys, I'll be right back.
I agree that they're the cause, but let's look at China. Totally egoistic, totally self-focused, only care about China. It's all about China.
Yeah, but China's already had a revolution. That's the thing. China's already had a revolution. Before the revolution, this was not the approach that China took. And actually, China through most of the
China doesn't have really quick. They don't have unions that are like Han only, right?
Right.
They got there specifically from like multinational or multi-ethnic.
Yeah, they have like
Coalitions.
56 different
Okay,
cultures
are we
or
going to
something like
ignore Xinjiang?
Yeah.
Are we going to ignore the Uyghur camps? They totally want.
No, we can talk about the CIA if you want. That's fine.
But that's a different topic. I want to talk
It's not
about
a different
China.
topic. Xinjiang's a CIA fucking op, dude.
Yeah, but they're still doing cultural conversion.
it's also important to realize
Cultural
China,
conversion's a good thing for them to do in that area.
China, unlike most
It's not
existing
good when
states,
people in the West do it,
Well,
but it's really not a
People in the
problem
West
for
don't do it.
Marxists.
We put people in Guantanamo
Okay.
Bay. We put people
We
on
do terrible things,
soil.
but they do great
No,
things.
we do
that are
much
not so
worse.
bad, actually.
We do much worse. They're
Yeah.
doing re-education. which is
I have
actually
it. I mean, we should stop getting bogged down in this until we see some real evidence of anything like
Correct.
actually bad, really horrific going on. It's just not something that should divide our focus from the imperialism of the West, which is the single most influential force in politics.
When
in
obviously
any
what it is,
country
hold on.
in every country, in every
person at a
country on
time.
earth.
Obviously, what the
Western-
Xinjiang story is designed to do is distract from the fact that the West has literally killed 1.5 million people in the Middle East in the past 15, 20 years. Like, objectively, we know this.
I mean,
Yeah,
you're talking
correct.
like empires don't do this
Murdered.
and will always do this forever.
And now it's everyone does it, right? No.
Until
No,
humanity, gets together and
Strong
plans
will equal weak
solidarity.
forever. And they
Yeah,
have
but
always done it.
objectively, there is a difference between
Oh,
how many
I don't
people,
agree with
say,
that.
for example,
That's-
America
that's-
has killed in
hold on.
Iraq and Afghanistan, and how many people China has killed in Iraq and Afghanistan, right?
It sounds like nihilism to me.
We can measure
to
that.
say people will always just exploit
It's
each other.
realism.
No, it's
I'm
not
trying to-
realism. You
I'm
don't
trying
know.
to-
No,
I'm
you
trying
don't
to
know.
live in reality.
No, but you
The only
don't
way to stop
know.
it is probably global domination.
So you don't know whether that is the nature of humanity, whether that is meant to be our path. You don't know that. You're just asserting that because you're a nihilist.
I'm asserting it because it's happened all the way until today. And I'm
Right,
trying to
so
live
the-
in a realistic world. You are
Right,
trying to live in a
no,
it actually hasn't always
No,
happened.
no,
And Marx
no.
documents this.
and that's how you lose people. That's how you
you're
lose
not.
people.
No, I don't care. I'm not concerned about losing people like you who are just talking me down and who are talking us down and just not even considering what we're trying to say. I'm not saying that it's definitely the case that things will certainly change in this specific way or another. I mean, I can't know for sure. I can have faith in certain developments of history
We're
and
making an assertion.
interpretations. But the fact of the matter is, you don't know what elements of humanity are destined to be changed. There are countless parts of humanity and human nature and human social culture that have changed over the last 200 years. And we have no idea how those will continue to change in the future with developing technology and social institutions, whatnot. So you can't say, oh, we are just doomed to always exploit one another, because that certainly will replicate that cycle forever. That is certain to not, push us towards any change. We need people to, at the very least, having my view en masse would make a better society. Belief that it's possible to have a better society would foster a better society. That's indisputable.
Okay. So I would just say my motivation. I want economic socialism to be popular. I want it to spread, and I think you lose the rhetoric when you're talking about hedging all your bets on a hypothetical instead of hedging all your bets on something that has been historically repeated over and over and over again. These imperialist trends, living with the realistic framework that you have to defend your own state, you have to defend your own borders, your own nation. I think it's much more like a historically robust way of living.
So then let me ask you this. Why is China?
A lot of Marxists.
Hold on. Why is China the only? Okay.
Just really quick. This is an actual divide within Marxism, within socialism, in many countries, and also just globally. Okay, this might just be an area we will not be able to reconcile. Some folks have an internationalist bent, some folks have a more nationalist bent. Okay, and that is not a divide that is one of the contradictions of our time that has to be resolved. If you ask me, I think that solidarity resolves that. I don't think that you can prioritize national solidarity within nations and develop socialism along the national characteristics of each individual country.
Which is why we have third worldism.
While also accepting international solidarity as well. You don't need to be actively hostile to international solidarity. You can kind of be agnostic on international solidarity and focus on national development and civilizational characteristics. That I'm all for, and that's part of why I'm somewhat partial to the MAGA communist movement, because I do think that economic nationalism, I think that is a natural way to use the population's impulses towards good in the medium-term future before revolution is possible.
I think expanding on this, right? This is why today we have existing systems like third worldism and Juche, which have historically had a preferable scenario that's played out in many of the most underdeveloped countries. And that national focus, that national liberation, that emphasis on prioritizing the nation and the solidarity of the nation has led to slow, temporary solutions for the greater problem. But what we have to realize about America is not a underdeveloped third world country. It is the most developed imperial core. And this is why when we talk about capitalism, we must prioritize and recognize, first off, capitalism is a global system, and its legitimacy is legitimized by the existing imperial core. When the imperial core is challenged, capitalism as a whole is then challenged. You can liberate as many third and second world countries as you want, but as long as the imperial core exists, as it does, creating imperialism and monopoly capitalistic hegemony, you will never be able to fully liberate yourself and have complete solidarity of the nation or even international solidarity.
I think China is the example that.
So again, what I was trying to say with China earlier, I want to then ask you, why is China today the only country in the world which is not a nation state, but more of a civilization state? Because this is what China is.
It's much more nation state than other countries.
It's not, though.
Of course they have multicultural aspects, but they're all within a near cultural group. It's like you don't have like these, vastly disparate groups. Like
56 different ethnic groups in China. What are you talking about?
Yeah, but you have like the Han, which are like the super majority, and then you have some different culture groups that are within the same grand culture group.
Every province.
America, compared to America, where it's like African.
So by the way, we Marxists, we divide a nation in a very particular manner, right? And it is through this understanding of what we know as a nation that we can say China is not a nation state, and that there are actually multiple nations within China. Okay. A nation is primarily determined through a few different factors: common territory, sociological and psychological makeup, political determination, and common economic resources and goals. Right. So when you take
I'm not sure this is going in a useful direction.
Okay, I just want to say this. I just say, how definitely not a super majority. They are 91% of the country. That is not.
Why is that relevant?
No, because you just said it's not an ethnic state. There's so many minorities. I mean, that's a dishonest way of framing it. Just to be clear.
The point, we don't need to get bogged down in this civilization state point, in this Duginist type of thinking. No, but I just, this is a distraction from the point of internationalism versus nationalism.
Hello?
as a socialist priority. That's what we were talking about. I think we should all agree as Marxists, as materialists, that nationalism, harnessing nationalism, is an essential part of any revolution. No revolution in the modern era has succeeded without nationalist elements, including the Russian, Chinese, Cuban, Vietnamese revolutions, the Korean Revolution, none of them, okay? So we have to incorporate non-nihilistic, specifically anti-nihilistic elements regarding national history. That includes the United States. We are going to, he is right, we are going to alienate a large core of Americans if our messaging is centered around the hatred of America and our history. That's not to say America doesn't have a heinous history in many respects, but there are positive elements, ethoses to take away from American history and culture that can be positive, like
But if you make your platform a nationalist one, you're just isolating groups that aren't part of.
But it doesn't have to be
the
so
American nation or nation state and that form. I'm just saying you're isolating groups who aren't considered part of the nation state or whatever America is.
Yeah. So I get what you're saying. That it doesn't have to be so black and white. We don't have to choose between. When we say nationalist or whatever, we don't. It doesn't have to be white nationalist. Like, I fully recognize that this, especially talking about American history, the most successful socialist groups, Marxist groups that ever developed in American history were black nationalist groups.
Particularly the Black Panther Party.
Isn't that a tendency that we struggled against, though? Like the racial, sectarian, or like supremacist nature?
No, but they weren't sectarian. If you look at the most...
No, I'm not talking about the black nationalists. I'm talking about the white nationalist nature of America's history.
So that we need
that have to be struggled against, and doesn't even the example of black nationalism show that? Because obviously black nationalism is founded in opposition to white supremacy, specifically, right?
Yes. Yeah. So any messaging, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, what do we do? What do we do as dialectics, folks? We have to synthesize. What we have here is a contradiction between nationalist messaging, and which is a core basis of any revolution, and it is also a wellspring of anti-revolutionary or counter-revolutionary thought as well. Nationalism.
But I mean,
so how do we use nationalism to best serve the revolution?
So here's how we
have to be clear, though. The Bolsheviks didn't say we have to do revolution because the fucking Polish are too stupid to do it or whatever, right? It wasn't like a nationalist revolution in the sense of we're smarter than those guys or something, right? It wasn't like that at all. It was almost just we're going to try to figure out what this German guy thought about, and we're going to try to implement it.
What I mean, let me just, I was very close to the end there. The crux of my point, and a good example that we can look to, is American history and looking at it through the lens of liberationism. There are great American thinkers in history who were liberationists, They were pre-socialists, many of them, and some of them were socialists themselves. Those people should be celebrated. There were liberationist aspects to American culture, to the American West and blah 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 whatnot, that have a romanticism that people still latch onto, and you can't just dismantle those things. So you reframe them in a positive light through the liberationist positives, that anyone could take away from that. And then you don't alienate the people who are saying, who love their country, the patriot elements of society. And then simultaneously you synthesize that with a message of America has been flawed. It has violated its creeds, but not the country. You don't frame it as the amorphous country violated its creeds, or was this oppressive, superstructure. You frame it through the lens of the ruling class. During the 1800s, it was the ruling class that wanted to maintain slavery. It was the Jim Crow period. All of the corporations preferred to be able to control the behavior of the labor force through the lens of oppression of Black Americans. Like, these were all oppressions of the ruling class, exploitations of the ruling class. We frame it as that. We synthesize love for our country with hate for the ruling class and the division between Black and white workers that it created. That's what happened. They wanted slavery to continue.
Yeah, but those other people,
Black people were labor competition for white workers. This was class antagonism. Okay? That was fomented by the ruling class.
But there's a lot of people in the country today who just don't hold like a long-standing history in the country, don't really feel any anything to these like ideals and these histories you're talking about. It's like what, 30% of the population has been here like 30 years or something, 30, 40 years. So like we have massive amounts of population.
I don't think.
Are you? If that's the case, are you saying the state should cater to people who are not loyal to the state?
I'm just saying that, like, I just don't really see this as being that effective for a lot of young people in America. I mean, or a lot of people I feel like America that are going to be radicalized.
I feel like in this scenario...
Actually, I would say the opposite to that, right? I would actually say the opposite to that. I would say that it's the young people the most who can actually be inspired to turn this kind of this mentality towards the ruling class. And we are seeing that actually with the existing parties denying the current genocide in the Middle East, and that being a huge talking point for most younger millennials and older Gen Xers, right? Or I'm sorry, Gen Zers. This has become a topic of where America is generally on the rise of radicalization, the populace as a whole. And if we
they're
can
not reframing American nation as this like with all these like myths of these characters throughout history.
Yeah, because no one's doing it.
Nobody's doing that. There is not an educative.
All of these people are criticizing these things without doing any of that.
But that's because of the lack. That is because of the lack. That is because of a lack of an educative sector right now. There is not a good educating sector for the working class.
It's not even. It's just a gradual process. We're not even talking about public school or anything. We're just talking about the population being baseline educated to look for the truth itself. And this is a gradual process. 30 years ago, only 10% of Americans could have considered themselves, would have considered voting for a socialist candidate. Now, half of the country would consider voting for a socialist candidate. They are gradually being exposed and warming up to socialism. And also, generally speaking, as the lies of the Soviet period of the Cold War have subsided and are no longer fashionable, without the presence of that propaganda, that pervasive propaganda, Cold War propaganda, they're not coming to the conclusion that socialism and Marxism are evil at nearly the same rate. So it's a gradual process.
It is also important to realize that it is much harder today.
Can I say something? Can I ask something?
Okay.
To do it.
Not like America.
Let this guy ask.
Americans are shifting towards like socialism. Like, what's going to happen under Trump? Like, he's going to he's been in office for a couple of days, and I already see that like he's going to cause some trouble and problems for like the rest of the world that we'll see in like 1 or 2 years.
So here's what's going to happen with Trump. Here's what's going to happen.
Can I finish? Like, his massive tax cuts and deregulation, it's just going to increase wealth inequality enormously, you know?
Yeah, okay. So,
and then like the world trade and all, it's like income gaps going to only increase, you know?
So here's what's going to happen with Trump. Ready? So Trump he's going to fail to solve the economic crisis in America, and it's going to be through the acceleration of this second Trump presidency, where people like Elon, people like Bezos, people like Zuckerberg, so these billionaires and millionaires, right, that hold a degree of capital at their disposal, they are going to profit the most. They are going to benefit the most from Trump being in office. He's going to fail to solve the economic crisis of the working class. It's going to be due to that fact that everything that he is doing right now is going to turn up, showing the majority of the population that they actually need substantial change, because people are going to be so fed up by the time that Trump leaves office. They're going to be so fed up with conditions worsening. They're going to end up going in the polar opposite direction of the way that the election went this last election cycle.
In my understanding, you just want to implement the original concept of communism, Marxism. Like, I understand, like, you want this utopia made from like what's happening now, like,
not utopia. Right? It's not a utopia. It's not a utopia because here's the thing. We're not trying to dismantle the entire system without any sort of method. You are purely trying to conflate this with anarchism. That's not what we're trying to go for.
Then what do you want?
Easy. So first you need the population as a whole. You need the population as a whole to come to a consensus that things are going that things need actual substantial change. It will be through that substantial change that a revolution.
This will never happen.
What?
This will never happen. This will fail.
Why don't you think it will happen?
People at its core just are really rotten. Like, they will, like, at the end of the day, like, you can't make this communist country without failure, without a person that wants to take control of the other person. It was like through the history, like, it just doesn't work like that. One person will always want control of the other person, and like, people as a whole, maybe some groups, you can make groups or parties that oppose to that, but there will always be that. Like, you can't just make a big whole family and make a change just like that. Like,
it's not going to happen overnight. So you're thinking,
of course, but it's not going to happen at all.
But it will happen.
Not over any nights.
It's not going to happen at all. You can wish all you want.
I'm not wishing anything. I'm not wishing anything. I'm looking at it. I'm looking at a process that will occur.
What is supposed to be happening? Like, I don't understand what's being debated right now.
Well, I think I was trying to answer Joseph's question, and I think Joy over here, that she's trying to change the topic to what this human nature aspect. She's trying to have a human nature aspect of this conversation, which that's not what I'm trying to address, because he asked what will happen through Trump doing what he is doing. Trump doing what he is.
Yeah, okay, you can continue.
Trump doing what he is doing. Yeah. Ask another question.
Like, a lot of people saying is America's going to head towards a civil war and all that, but like, when this is Trump's last time, so I was wondering, like, what's going to happen after this term, because Trump can't run for president.
Did you know? Have you looked into the amendment that he's trying to amend?
It's going to be another.
The answer is whatever the dumbest option is. That's what America.
There's just going to be another person like Trump that people will vote for. This is
genuinely the stupidest
option. Probably one that Trump himself props up.
Yeah, it's like his vice president.
Also, by the way, have you guys even looked into the amendment that he's trying to amend right now?
Wait. It might be that he introduces an amendment that allows him to run for a third term.
Which he is trying to do.
Comes back and everybody votes Obama.
He's actually trying to do that right now.
What'll happen is Melania will run as a Democrat, and everyone will go crazy and vote for her. There you go. There's
Yes,
the dumbest
yes.
possible option.
I
for
wish.
America.
This is my
We
dream.
would eat that up.
Yes, I agree.
She'd get all the votes. Especially because people would feel like Trump's the president. He'd be like, I'm just here in the White House. I'm not doing anything, but actually I'm doing everything. You're welcome.
Okay, Hegsuck, by the way, I just want to answer the statement you made a while ago. You said that around 30% haven't lived in America for like only for the last 30 years or something. And I just want to say, if the ruling class has dumped that amount of third worlders to your country for divide and conquer purposes, for profit margin earnings and all these things, the nation's interest is to deport them all. Because these people will not be loyal to the state, okay? I mean, I
when
think
you
that's
say below 30 years, would that include people that are just young?
No, like people who are just
Can America go to a civil war?
What are we talking about right now?
We're too late.
The group, the way you defined it seems to include people that are just young,
Yeah,
not
so
just immigrants.
yeah, so like I think it's like immigrants to the United States, like first generation's like 14% or something. You can look it up, but it's a lot. It's immigrants in the United States and people that have been here like 2 or 3 generations that don't have like long-term ties to the country is a very sizable minority in the country. So like this nationalist perspective in regards to America really just doesn't make that much sense to me.
I think second generation is already like introduced and somewhat assimilated, especially in US culture. But third generation, I think, is fully assimilated in most cases.
I don't believe in the word assimilation. I think that's just a fake word.
What is this like some kind of race prioritization?
It's like when you look in the words, what they actually mean, it's just so vague and so indeterministic. You know, people are sectarian by nature. They don't care about
I'm very clear with my language. When I say assimilation, you can ask me what
you're
I mean.
assimilating.
My man
I don't think America does a good job of assimilating people, but okay.
That's the question. No, stop.
The concept
stop
of it historically, like, have you studied the Greeks and the Romans? Do you understand the Roman gods come from the Greek gods? Do you understand?
I need him to differentiate because he criticized me. I need him to differentiate. Can there be such a thing as assimilation for whatever thing that you prioritize in respect to the U.S. Society and population?
Wait.
Like, do you prioritize ethnicity, so assimilation is impossible, or do you think culture, and this is what I'm looking at, is the main factor here?
No.
Where people assimilate.
No. Actually, when you look historically into China and the Soviet Union, right? They actually created pretty much from scratch a brand new culture, and it did have remnants of the previous existing cultures that existed before, but these cultures were more based around proletarian solidarity. And so what we actually saw, for example, in China was a cultural revolution or a color revolution, right? Which actually prioritized the assimilation of all its ethnic groups, of all its different cultural groups into a common class interest, which was the proletarian interest.
Yet it had a
so in America,
or identity that it projected into its whole sphere of influence. No, stop. I have a disagreement with that. There's a core identity.
We just look at like actual data for immigrants in America and their opinions. Because in America, it's like second and third generation immigrants oftentimes feel less American and less accepted in America than their parents.
Which is, yes, that is true. That is true. It's also important to realize, right?
Because of realities.
Well, I want to ask you then, what is American culture?
Now you're just arguing against whether or not these people feel assimilated in the country. They don't feel like they're part of the country. They're saying they don't feel like they're part of the country. And you're saying, yes, you are very well integrated in the country, even though you're saying you're not. So it's just you arguing with the people.
No, you're misunderstanding. These things can be true at the same time. You can be a fully assimilated part of the country and feel like you're not belonging because you have heightened sensibilities towards your own integration because you have whatever differentiating factors about your ethnic
conflicting ideas.
It is conflicting, but it can be true.
No, it can't. It's totally conflicting. It's like you are loyal to America, but you're not loyal to America.
One of the main things.
What's the metric?
A first-generation immigrant, usually from China, for example, into the US, they would have way less sensibilities and they would be way quicker to feel like they're actually becoming an American and assimilated than potentially their offspring.
Okay, listen. So the point with the Chinese is actually a very special problem.
Wow. Okay. Very disorganized chat. I will say this about overall, right? If we are to prioritize as Marxist, I kind of want to just ravel around what they were talking about earlier with national and international solidarity. And I was going to rebuttal to, I think it was Darth Soviet. I was going to say, well, hold on. It's not necessarily a matter of trying to convince people to be supportive of the nation as a whole, but moreover, the fact, right, that in order to establish international solidarity, there must be a prioritization of the national liberation within the imperial core. But that must be prioritized in the sense that it is cohesively being understood as an international movement. Because you can have all sorts of national liberation attempts in every country around the world, but they only work and are sufficient enough if there is substantial change within the nation itself. That, though, kind of moves away from what the goal of capitalism imperialism is. By the way, capitalist imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, which Lenin lays out in his book, The Highest Stage of Imperialism, The Highest Stage of Capitalism, the goal of it is to expand on this idea of an international bourgeoisie. China has become a huge player in the competitive system of international capitalism, competing against the very international bourgeoisie that is supplied and reproduced within the imperial core. So when we look at America and we see that we are going to have a movement for the national liberation of America, that kind of is more ideal. That becomes almost in a sense very utopian in its own thought. And this is due to the fact that Juche and third worldism, Maoism, even Vietnam's movements and Thailand and all of the other Southeast Asian countries that took a socialist turn in the late half of the 20th century, those movements won't work in the imperial core because of the conditions that exist today in the imperial core. The United States of America is not underdeveloped, let alone it is not a feudal system. It is the fact that we are living in the most developed era of capitalism where international solidarity must be prioritized. That is my overall arcing point as a Marxist, specifically more of a classical leaning Marxist. I mean, I will pull a little bit from, I guess, a national liberation stance, and I will say that we can support the nation in its liberation attempts if we are doing so by creating solidarity and a immersive, cohesive kind of collective experience with the working class generally. Not just the white working class, not just the black working class, not just the disabled working class, not just the women or the males, right? But the working class in general. and yes, that can be very progressive. It can incorporate some aspects of social and cultural attempts, but unless you are prioritizing international solidarity of the working class, the culture war will always be predominant within American politics. And we can only be substantial in our movements as economic leftists if we are doing so based on the core principles of Marxism as a international movement of the working class. What was her name? Joy, I think it was. Either way, that girl that was talking to me about how, well, this isn't going to happen. She was very consumed in the human nature aspect of it all. But again, as we presented to her before, I wasn't going to rehash it because I think it was said enough times in that conversation in that chat room. But human nature is predominantly determined through sociological and societal aesthetics, right? Impacts of the material conditions of an existing society. What was human nature under feudalism is not human nature now under capitalism. What will be, or even there's even a development change with human nature between early and late stage capitalism. For example, right? What do we often hear the Republican Party saying all the time? They want to bring back traditional values. Now, yes, this is actually going against what the current Republican administration is doing by supporting the finance capitalist class, by continuing to exploit the American workers by now bringing over Indians to replace the Mexicans that they're shoving out. This is why it's not a matter of immigration and more that we should be against mass immigration. But that also means that we need to be against the very process in which the Republican administration is doing with the 401s, right? With the 401ks. Being against that will also address this. But again, the human nature aspect of traditionalism, it is not human nature anymore under capitalism to have a family of 3, a family of 5, okay? And have a working class dad and a stay-at-home mom, right? Those are just impossible to have today. And it's because under capitalism today, a person cannot graduate high school, afford to live, they cannot buy a house, continue to go to college, and be able to pay rent off of one income. It is impossible. This is why most Americans today actually work 3 jobs. And even then, they don't work 3 jobs and they're the only one working in their household. Usually they are working probably 2 jobs, the male, and the woman's probably working a job. Or maybe vice versa, but it doesn't matter, right? It's a matter of the fact that this traditional setup of the family is largely gone. And it won't be coming back because that's just not the development and evolution of the human nature of capitalism. The human nature of communism and socialism will be more egalitarian, yes, but it will take a different format. And how it is produced, how it is formulated, is all going to be dependent on how we today react, and not necessarily react, but more respond, right? Respond and attempt to solve the economic crisis that the right and the far right, alt-right, is going to fail to do. Because they are going to be reacting to this nationalistic, arbitrary, idealistic attempt to bring back traditional values, while we will be making substantial revolutionary potential by spreading class consciousness, being a source of education for the working class on basic material understandings, and it will be through that they liberate themselves. But yeah, I mean, we will see. We have 4 years of this Trump presidency. If he can go through with the things that he's wanting to do, I think that we will see an acceleration into the conditions worsening that are going to inspire a revolution. I would have said 3 years ago, a revolution in my lifetime, impossible. Today, I can expect a revolution 2 to 10 years' time. That is my personal analysis that I am making and coming to a conclusion about. But again, we are Marxist, right? And we have to be prepared to explore the possibility and the realm of possibilities that will come with Trump's second presidency. Thank you guys. That is all I have for today. I will gladly probably do another live stream either tomorrow or maybe later this weekend. But yeah, my working class fellow comrades, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you for listening, and I am out. American Marxist.